Hi, I'm Kim. You're watching Kim Wilson TV. My channel is dedicated to helping victims of narcissistic abuse get free and stay free. Before we get going with this morning's video, I just want to take a moment to thank Barbara very much for your donation to our channel's PayPal account. Thank you, Barbara. We've used the term post-traumatic stress disorder many times, but today I want to talk about it, what it is, how we got it, and how we can get rid of it. There are many ways that post-traumatic stress disorder can manifest in a person's life. Now, for many people, post-traumatic stress disorder comes from a single one-time event: rape, a home invasion, a violent assault, a car crash, your house burns down, a weather event. There are all sorts of one-time events that can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. For victims of narcissistic abuse, this is repetitive abuse. These are not one-time events. This is prolonged, repetitive abuse, and it can be happening minute to minute. It can be happening day to day. But when you are exposed to constant repetitive abuse, this really increases your risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. And no, this is not a sign of personal weakness. This, in many cases, is speaking volumes of a person's kindness and compassion. More sensitive people will often be more greatly impacted by post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from abuse. Certainly not to undermine or minimize the horrendous impact war has on people, but we too have been fighting a war of sorts, a domestic war, a war in our homes. So to do some research on this, I went to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs website. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder can be self-diagnosed fairly easy. Statistics say that a person who has experienced a trauma, in most cases, will be healed or well into a healing process within 30 days. If 30 days have come and gone, and you have found yourself in a state of depression, experiencing heightened states of anxiety, stress, panic, if you still can't sleep, if you're having night terrors, if horrible images are constantly repeating in your head, if you're constantly reliving the horrible events, well, if 30 days have passed, the likelihood that you'll have post-traumatic stress disorder is extremely high. In fact, you could probably self-diagnose yourself as having post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, in some cases, post-traumatic stress disorder will start right away, but in other cases, victims do not experience symptoms for months or even years after the horrifying event. Now, either way, whether or not the post-traumatic stress disorder kicks in immediately or down the road, these symptoms should not last longer than 4 weeks. 30 days is pretty much tops. Anything beyond that has now become problematic and is a pretty clear sign that you have post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder has to be taken really seriously. When something causes a sufferer to feel a prolonged sense of depression and hopelessness, well, this is going to induce a lot of really negative thinking and can really cripple a person in many ways. When people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, quite commonly they're unable to work or provide for themselves. And this, as we know, could really alter a person's life, catapult you into a long-term state of poverty or even homelessness. When a person is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, they're often experiencing a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance, chronic pain, all kinds of physical symptoms, limiting your ability to function normally. All of this has to be taken very, very seriously. And yes, there are lots of ways to help you heal from post-traumatic stress disorder. This does not have to be a permanent condition. Now, all too often we've seen with combat veterans that alcohol and drug abuse becomes very commonplace. So you really, really need to make a conscious effort to avoid drug and alcohol abuse. This is extremely important because these problems are only going to compound your situation in ways unimaginable. Another thing I would really avoid is prescription medication. Now, I say this because There's so much information out there that says there is no antipsychotic medication that actually helps a person. What it really is an emotional straitjacket. And that too is the last thing you need. To be able to move fluidly through negative emotions, you really have to be able to feel them, process them, and come to understand them and move beyond them. When you just suppress them with a chemical straitjacket, this is going to impair healing really bad. Now, some really effective therapies include cognitive processing therapy. And what this is coming to understand it. What we do here together at YouTube all the time, educating ourselves. The more educated you are about what happened to you, the better you will come to understand it. The more you understand it, the better you can process it. Now, part of the educational process for me helped me to understand that I didn't invite any of this. I didn't do any of this. This is not a manifestation of my broken inner child. Someone else did this to me. This was done to me. And understanding that really helped to free me of any humiliation and shame and guilt, surrounding the abuse. So I think that education is extremely important, and statistics show the more you understand about the abuse, the better chances you have of healing from it. Now, the other day I come across a YouTube video by an alleged therapist that claims discussing abuse only prolongs recovery. Well, that's not what Veterans Affairs has to say about it. They recommend a form of therapy called prolonged exposure. The claim is the more you talk about it, the easier it gets to talk about it, and the easier it is to discuss this issue, the more diminished it becomes. Now, I'll say for myself, initially when I started the channel, it was very, very hard to discuss what had happened to me. And it has steadily gotten easier, and it has steadily made the problem appear smaller and smaller. So, share your story. Tell your story. Start a YouTube channel, start a blog, write a book. Tell your story. Free yourself from this through prolonged exposure. All too often, victims isolate, they withdraw from society, and this in itself is really counterproductive to healing. It is really important that we reconnect. Now, I'm not suggesting you volunteer at the maximum security penitentiary, but you certainly could volunteer one day a month at an animal shelter, at a senior center. There's lots of ways that you can become active in society again in a very non-threatening way. Every community is going to offer night school courses. They tend to be very inexpensive and very short term. Thai cooking, aromatherapy. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could do. And the fun part about that is you're with other like-minded people who are now all together in a very, very non-threatening environment. Now, I've concluded that we can self-diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder, and we can also combat post-traumatic stress disorder ourselves in our lives in real time if we're willing to educate ourselves, process that information, and come to terms with what happened. If we're willing to discuss it, and I mean discuss it till we disappear it down to nothing. If we're willing to get back out into society and do something productive, we can make radical changes to how we're feeling. I also think a key element is not letting your head run away with negative thoughts. If you find yourself caught up in negative thoughts, your life is never going to be the same, you're never going to be okay again, reel that ship back in, because that's not the truth. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. We're all getting out of this together. I'm Kim. You're watching Kim Wilson TV. I hope you guys are having a great narc-free day.